Hi guys, welcome to the video, welcome to Frankfurt in Germany, and welcome to this beauty here. This is the Boeing 727-200 freighter in Microsoft 2020. It's by Flight Sim Studio and it's going to be the subject of today's video. Now before I go any further, a quick shout out to say thank you to Aerosoft for supplying the scenery. As I say, this is Frankfurt, it's their latest release. Now I'm not reviewing it as such, but we will have a quick look around, see what we think. I've already noticed that I've got a model matching issue over here if you see this bright pink aircraft, but that's probably down to me more than either the scenery or the sim itself. But as I say, what we'll do is we will have a look at the scenery in a moment, but we will concentrate on the aircraft because that's really what the review video is about. So without further ado, I'll just call up a bit about it. Boom, and here we are. So I've got a route planned. We're going to go from where are we going? We're going Frankfurt to Brussels. Never been to either of these airfields, although in a strange way I have been to Frankfurt, but I didn't go into the terminal. And it's a friend of mine at the time, God, this was many years ago, in the days when you could do it. He was a captain for an airline that flew into Frankfurt, and we went to Frankfurt, overnighted. So went to stop in a hotel, had a few drinks, got back in the plane the following day and did the rest of the sectors. So I flew around with him in a jump seat for 2 days. It was absolutely fantastic. There's no way you'd get away with it these days. But all I saw of Frankfurt was the terminal, the hotel, and then the terminal again. And that was it, which is a real shame because I think I need to go back there maybe and have a good look around. But yeah, that was my experience of Frankfurt. Maybe not the greatest. It was really enjoyable with the flying. Lovely to see all of that good stuff. And it just so happened to be at the point where I just got all my commercials, so I was itching to get into an airline before it all fell apart. My career, that is, not the airline. And then we're going to Brussels, a place that I've never been to in real life, be it ferried around by my friend or indeed just travelling. But these are the two locations, and we're going to have a quick trip between those. I'll edit the video so that the long boring bits aren't included. But this is the basics of what we're doing, and we'll be using information from the flight plan as we go. It's just been picked off SimBrief, as I've shown, and there's our product. So this is the 727. It's by Flight Sim Studio, and this is their main page for it, and it's a really good, attractive page, to be honest. It's not always something you can say about developers, but it does look really nice. But it highlights the add-on is available at Aerosoft. And not entirely sure what the price is. I'll probably pull that up in a moment. So here we are on the Aerosoft website. The 727 is €40.29, including VAT at 20% because I'm in the UK. And EDDF, see if we can get that as well. Mega Airport Frankfurt is €25.16. So yeah, Microsoft Flight Simulator. So there's your prices. As I say, I'm focusing on the FSS aircraft predominantly in the video. So what I'll also highlight is, in addition to the information that's here, which is really quite good, what they have is they have, instead of a manual, they have what they call a documentation hub. And actually I think it's wonderful. So if you do want to have a look at the information about the aircraft, it's on their website. I'll drop a link in the description, but it's free to have a look, and I would urge you to do so. But it's a really, really nicely done document. It's very accessible. The way they've laid it out, can't fault it. I do wish all developers would do something like this because it's so easy. But they've got a quick start guide, which is great. Very, very useful if you want to just get into the air. Gives you all the information about speeds for flaps, etc. But yeah, it's a great startup in terms of the documentation. How to update it if you want to update it, and then it goes through the normal procedures checklist. Now this checklist, you'll see it again in the aircraft. But this is obviously a photocopy or a scan of whatever of the original documentation, but it's nice to see it anyway. But it does have a sort of cleaned up presentation version, which is very easy to follow and go through. But it's also got a cool gadget which we'll look at in a bit, but it goes through all the various stages, goes through all of that stuff, so taxiing, etc. These are the navigation options. So it comes with the SIVA INS, inertial navigation system, as standard as available. The GNS 530, so the usual Garmin that you see in your Cessna 172, is available, and also you can just do VOR or beacon navigation, because you can also do ADFs. Now what I would say is the beacon navigation is maybe not something that's so good online, so VATSIM, etc. Certainly if you have a look at Europe, there's vast tracts of area nav where it's going on GPS or inertial navigation. It's not going VOR to VOR. And to be fair, the area nav seems to be becoming more and more prevalent across the globe. So things like this, the INS and the GNS 530, are very useful tools to have. The VOR to VOR nav, it's fun, but if you're flying on VATSIM, for example, or IVAO, it's maybe less useful. And then you've got the two add-ons, the PMS GTN 750 and the TDS GTN XI. Now I've got the latter. We'll be trying that out in the sim, see if it works. I have had issues. I've just updated to the Pro version. I have had issues with it integrating with the sim, so we'll see how we get on. But I know if there's a fault, I know it's in relation to this, because I've flown routes without the GTN and it's been absolutely fine. I don't know about the PMS GTN 750. But there we go. So auto flight, there's some information about auto flight, for example, and then where's it gone? Performance tables. This is what I'm after. This is what we're after. Ooh, performance tables. Come on. And this has quite some useful information. So the engine's JT8D-9A engines. We'll have a look at those, because they're what's called a low bypass turbine engine, which is fascinating to me. Anyway, the more fascinating thing than anything else is the thrust reverse, which we may well mention the nature of that later. But also included, you've got, in terms of that, you've got the tables and charts, which most of these are available in the cockpit on the flight engineers table. But there is quite a lot of useful information here, and it's if you're into doing some more in-depth flying, then this will certainly be beneficial for you to be able to have a look at things. It's really nicely done. So yeah, the documentation hub, highly recommended. I think it's a really good idea. If you're considering buying it, I'd suggest feel free to go and have a look at their documents hub. As I say, it's free to have a look at, and then you can see the level and depth that they've gone into with this aircraft. So where are we going? Well, I'm not concentrating on the route, because the test is not to test if SimBrief gives us a route. We're flying offline so we don't get any horrible interruptions, but we're going from Frankfurt, instrument departure. We're going all the way through the various airways for a standard arrival into Brussels 25 left. And as I say, I've not flown to either of these airfields in the virtual world, so your guess is going to be as good as mine. So let's have a look at the outside of this beastie then, and we'll see what we think. And now, as I say, I've previously been... Ooh, let's just slow that bad boy down a bit. Where's it gone? Here we go. We'll slow that down to not dead stop, but about there. We'll slow that down to about there. That should be better. Right, here we go. So as I say, I've had a 727 experience in a sim before. It was in X-Plane, the FlyJ Sim 727, and that was an in-depth study level. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. For me, this isn't quite study level, and there's a lot of things that will sort of give rise to that. But having said that, we don't always want study level. What we often want is just a really good representation of an aircraft, so that we can have a lot of good fun in it. And for me, at the moment, that's what I feel about it. Now, what I will say is, in terms of handling, you do have to practice this thing. Now, I'm a bit out of sorts. I've not flown that much of late, so I'm just getting back into the whole idea of handling the aircraft well. But yes, as I say, you do need to actually fly this thing. It won't do everything for you, like maybe a 737 800 or an Airbus will. But let's have a look at the outside. So overall, initially, looks very nice, very tidy, very well done. You've got a lot of nice 3D objects, such as the windscreen wipers, very well modelled and prominent. Again, there's 3D appearance in terms of the doors, and the overall shaping is very nicely done. Not too much in the way of straight lining. We've got just a texture line here, a bit jagged between the radome and the fuselage, but I have to say overall the initial impressions are very good. You'll notice maybe that as we come round, I've not seen it in other add-ons, but you can see the dials on the engineer's panel as we look through the glazing from the outside in. Some of them are black, so it's a bit of a weird thing if you see it, but you know, it is what it is. So continuing on, let's have a nice close look. Now the 3D elements that are on the exterior, so I believe this is the temperature probe, and then this is obviously one of the pitot tubes. They're not great in terms of their texturing or detailing, but they are what they are. They do serve a function, and they do it pretty well, to be honest. You're not going to win any prizes on the basis of how well you model a pitot tube, in my opinion. However, the front of the aircraft, the nose looks very good. Good shaping, not too much straight lining. Nuts and bolts are not the greatest texture, and if anything, that's probably what I would give as one of the things for me that's not necessarily the greatest, is the texturing. It's good, but it's good, but it's not the greatest. However, we're looking at €40 product, so you know, you can make your minds up as to whether you think that's a good price or not. Looking around the front of the aircraft at this range, you know, we're looking really close at this thing. As soon as you pop out, it looks a little bit better. Not quite sure what's going on with the PBR texturing here. That's a bit leery. It's a bit in your face, but nonetheless, we'll keep having a look around. Now, one of the things I would like to highlight, the modelling of the landing gear is absolutely stupendously good. A couple of real details that I absolutely love. The lens, oh god, that just makes me sing with glory. But the texturing, the shaping, the fact that we've got 3D tread in the tyres, they've spent a lot of time and effort going to this level of detail. And then we get to the disappointing thing, which is when I look at the textures. These are, to all intents and interests, spoiling it. Look at the dirt and the grubbiness and the filth around the nose gear, and then the inside doors and the nose gear bay are pristine. Just lets it down a little bit for me. I don't know, I can't think that that's going to be accurate. I can't think you'd have pristine interior doors, but you know, I stand to be corrected. So as we have a look along the aircraft, static ports here, but overall I've got to say it's very well modelled. One of the areas I often have a look at is around the wing roots, because this is quite a difficult area for them to have a convincing 3D model. But this seems pretty good. It's nice and curved. You can see a little bit of straight lining, but it's crisp, it's tidy, very nicely done. We might come back to these bad boys in a bit. These are lift augmentation devices for the leading edge, but unlike slats that you normally see with say an Airbus where they just drop forward and down, these are what's called Kruger flaps. So the 737 has them as well. I don't know if the 737 MAX does, but older 737s have them exactly the same thing. So obviously it's one of those things, why reinvent the wheel? If you've got Kruger flaps on your 707 or 727, you're not going to reinvent them for the 737 necessarily. You're just going to make use of your knowledge of the technology and improve it. Textures on the wing are very nice indeed. Looks very grubby, very well used, which I do like, because this is a freighter as opposed to an aircraft that would be taking our holiday makers around. Nice wingtips with the lights there, nicely done. Let's just go up a little bit. You can see the static wicks present and correct, and then you've got the control surfaces across the back of the aircraft. Wing, actually, while I remember, we'll go down and have a look at the main gear. See what delights we can see there. Look at that. I mean, years ago we couldn't have hoped for anything like that in terms of the 3D modelling of even just a wheel hub, but once you get into the point where you're looking at nuts, bolts, pipes, wires, it's absolutely glorious. Now you see inside of these undercarriage doors, grubby as anything, and then obviously you've got up into the wheel well. Now this aircraft, compared to a lot of modern aircraft, is slightly odd in that the left-hand wheel well, so let's just scoot through here because we can, don't know if it's going to be visible. Is that it there? The left hand, yeah, that's it. Continuing along the back, again still looks, come on controls, I've got a Thrustmaster Warthog throttle and it's old and tired, very old and very tired, a bit like me to be honest. Engine intakes, so this is an old school turbofan engine, so it's got 2 stages. It's got basically a hot section and a cold section, if you like. So imagine a tube within a tube. So that innermost tube is our hot section. That's like a traditional jet engine, basically. Sucks air in, compresses it, sets fire to it, and then it explodes, goes out the back as that hot stream of high energy air, which we think of as a jet. However, with this sort of engine, you have a second set of fans, one at the front, one at the back. That hot core air goes through the fan at the back, which then turns another fan at the front, which is another compressor. And this is known as the cold section. So you've got the hot section and the cold section, and this section is bypass air that goes down the sides of the hot section. So what you get out of the back of the aircraft is a mixture from the 2 sections of the engine, the hot and the cold, and you'll see it more prominently in modern airliners where they've got these huge intakes, and if you look through, when you look through from in front, you can see the blades, all of these blades around here, you can pretty much see through them, and the reason is that the core engine's much smaller than the overall diameter. It's fascinating. Have a look at a modern jet engine from the front. They're amazing pieces of engineering. But here we've got low tech. Now in terms of the modelling, I mean it's okay, but having said that, how many times are you going to stare down the intake of your engines? Probably not that often, I wouldn't have thought. These are fantastic. Now in terms of reverse thrust, there's basically 2 sorts of reverse thrust you get on an engine, and this is the old style, and this has clamshell doors that fold down, and they fold to form a bucket. The thing is, what it means is that all of the exhaust from the jet engine is deflected forwards. Now when you see more modern engines with the big turbo fans, you'll notice they normally have bypass doors that open out somewhere sort of in the front quarter or third of the engine, and what they do is the more modern ones deflect the cold section. So when you power up your thrust reversers, you're increasing your core hot engine, and that's still delivering thrust in a modern aircraft, and then you're deflecting the vast majority of the power, which comes from your big fan at the front. That's what you're deflecting forward. However, in an older version of this, we'll try and show it later when we do a landing, or even before if we're mucking around, you'll see that they have clamshell doors, that these doors here, one there and one there, they come and fold over and completely block rearward airflow. Very good, very efficient, not really used that much these days because the engines don't lend themselves to it. So as I say, you've got the inner and the outer, the hot and the cold sections of this, and you can see they all come out of just one tube at the end, whereas a modern engine, you have the massive fan shroud at the front, and it wouldn't be something that's viable really, but fascinating. Anyway, as we look up, let me get back to my controls. You can see the various vortex generators on the wing surface to keep the airflow energized. Another sort of pitot tube here, not entirely sure where that's from. Obviously we've got a middle engine as well, because we're a tri-jet coming up to the tail. Again, nicely modelled, very nice. They've got a lovely selection of liveries, I will say that. There are 727 still in operation in the world. In fact, there's 2 operating in the UK. They do oil spill response. They go by the call sign Broadsword, which I think is just the most fantastic call sign. But a couple of things that I've noticed that have led me to the conclusion it's not study level is generally around the control surfaces and the manipulation of the control surfaces. So in the real aircraft, your ailerons and your elevators have manual reversion. Your rudder does not. So in the real aircraft, the rudder can only be operated if you have hydraulic pressure. But you'll also notice a split rudder. If we get a chance, we'll have a look later. And I'm not sure if it's a 727 or the 737 or even the 707, but they had an issue where they had a control failure of some description, and it led to a design for a split rudder, which is fascinating. In terms of the elevator control, it's got the normal airliner trim that you get. It's got the normal ailerons, but it's also got the smaller control surfaces here for manual reversion. Basically, the theory is that you control these, they then fly into a position that moves the actual elevator into the correct position required for the flight. Very clever. MD-80s, 82s, etc., they all use that system, so they haven't even got hydraulics on their elevator. It seems to work perfectly fine. And if, in effect, you could argue that by not having an elevator hydraulic system, something's potentially even more reliable. But there we go. So just a final look along. As I say, the textures, the liveries, there's quite a few bundled with it. So yeah, in sort of summary for the exterior, it's nicely modelled. I wouldn't be shouting about the textures. They're okay. Liveries are okay. I mean, they're good at a distance. They look really, really nice. I do like the choices of what they've done. Very, very good. And the 3D modelling overall is great. The only things that let it down for me are the rather sort of bland parts like the refueling probes, which are just sort of grey blobs stuck on, and the inside of the wheel well, where there's no texturing. And but overall, I think it's really nice. The question is whether for €40 odd, whether you think you're getting what you pay for. As I say, the word I'd use sometimes is rustic. It's very sort of rustic and sort of basic in how it's been done. But as I say, at a distance, it looks really nice. However, I don't spend money to look at something on the outside. I look at it from the inside, and I love flying it. So let's have a look at the inside and see where we get from there. So here we are in the cockpit, and what we're looking for in the cockpit, if I'm honest, you can have a look at all the detail, etc. I want atmosphere for an aircraft this age. You know, if it's a modern A320, it's not really that atmospheric. You know, it's a technical marvel. It's got lots of bells, lights and whistles. But this age, in this era of aircraft, needs to exude atmosphere. And the cockpit in this place is really atmospheric. They've done a fantastic job of the modelling and the textures. Let me assure you of that. It's just wonderful. So we'll have a tour of the cockpit. Some of the 3D modelling is just there for show. You can't put the masks on or anything. Down here we've got the mobile phone. We'll come back to that in a moment. But overall, I have to say the textures and the 3D modelling are done to a very nice standard. So if you zoom in quite close, you can see all the nuts and bolts present and correct. Very nicely done. Absolutely no qualms here. Things like the edges, the texturing there. I mean, that's just glorious. That is fantastic overall. But if I go nice and close in, we can have a look at that. Look at that texture. And the lighting. How good is that? And then we're going to get just a little bit of the idea of the 3D modelling of the panel in terms of the depth. And you can see the depth and the gauges. Fantastic. It's really, really well done. Really well done. The texturing's lovely. I find sometimes some of the things that stand out too much are where we have, like, you know, the 3D movable bits, like the bugs here, but it's not too sharp, not too sharp a contrast. There is one I'll point out which is a bit like garish. We'll point that out in a moment, but look at the level of detail, attention to detail that's gone into this. It's really nicely done. Lovely bit of 3D modelling, really nice. Texturing, again, lovely. The 3D modelling, good depth. Really nice. Can't fault that. Really can't fault that. The attention to detail on the knobs in terms of the wear and tear. Really nicely done. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the panel, you've nailed it, guys. It's absolutely fantastic. This weird device up here is what's called a comparator. Now, I don't want to draw too many comparisons to the FlyJSim X-Plane equivalent, but that's set up to work in this. The theory is that if there's a discrepancy between the left-hand seat and the right-hand seat in terms of these elements, then it will flag up with a light. It will warn you that there's a discrepancy. And I haven't seen a way that I can get it to function in this. That may be operator error. But as you know, this is where we get to the point of, is it a study sim or is it something that's not a study sim, it's just really, really good. Again, we've got some fascinating things from this era. So if you're used to plug it in and it will go and fly itself, this bad boy won't. Now, I am not by any stretch of the imagination an expert in the aircraft, its operation and its avionics. It's going to take some time to get to grips with all the nuances of this aircraft. But this little panel here, is really, really important. And you see it's got FD and AP. In this aircraft, in this era, so I think it's a Sperry autopilot, I'm not entirely sure, but the flight director was a completely separate thing to the autopilot. So we're used to our modern aircraft where the autopilot and the flight director are all in one and the same system. They're not in this, so it's entirely possible to have your flight director saying one thing and your autopilot completely doing a different thing. So it's something to watch out for. You will notice there's a little button down here, or a little light I should say, because these are lights not buttons, that says GPS, and that's because we can have GPS, and in fact do have GPS fitted in this aircraft. But yeah, looking at 3D modelling, it's absolutely great. So I mentioned day glow jarring things, and here's the bad boy. Not quite sure what's going on here. You know, you see all the other reds, oranges, etc. around in all the other instruments. And then I don't like it, I'll be honest. Altitude selector, this is a preset basically, so if you want to preset an altitude, fly to an altitude, you have to preset it. It won't, in this era of aircraft, it won't play ball quite to the same level. Nav GPS switch, because obviously GPS is a later addition, or that sort of navigation equipment is a later addition to an aircraft like this. So they would have just used radio nav in the early days, but big total air temperature here, very important for your anti-icing. Coming down here, this is one of the areas where very nicely done, and you can see it's split in the middle for the two rudder halves, upper and lower. But things like the noises, sounds, very nicely done. And then your damper looks like it's on by default. So you've got an upper and a lower for the two parts of the rudder. Love these old gauges. These are absolutely glorious. Now I mentioned the engine. There's an inner and an outer. So the N2 is the inner section. This is the hot section of the engines. We've got three engines obviously. The outer cooler section is the N1 fan. So that's the bigger fan at the front, driving the sort of cool section of air through. And this is the smaller sort of core engine, which has the hot exhaust. But you'll see here it's pretty similar gauges to anything you'll have seen in a normal 737 or the like. N1 exhaust, N2, and then fuel flow down here. And then this is something you don't see in a lot of aircraft. You generally see it more in Rolls-Royce engines these days. You don't tend to see it in other types of engine, but it's the EPR, or the engine pressure ratio. So it is what it says on the tin, but it's basically one of the ways that you would set power in an aircraft of this vintage or era. And then they obviously got obsessed about flaps, so they wanted to have a look at every section of flaps and every section of flap movement. And then down here, this is an unusual one. This is a combined lamp. You'll see it says low oil filter. It's because it's got two modes. The first one is if it's got low oil pressure, it illuminates for the engine. The second one is if the filter becomes blocked, it also illuminates. But to the best of my knowledge, there's no failure modelling in this, so we shouldn't really see it come on for a filter blockage. The standard sort of Boeing undercarriage bits, and then we scoot over to the co-pilot side, the first officer's side. Again, we've got our massive glaring orange thing. But as I say, the other instrumentation and 3D modelling is done to a very high standard. Then we come to centre pedestal, really nicely done, all proper old school stuff. This is where you start to get into how well you can manage radios if you're flying online, but really nicely done. Again, pedestal really nicely done. I've only got two throttles on my sim, so my Warthog, so I've just bound all three together. But great sounds. Yeah, great sounds. Brilliant. Really nicely done. And then the other bits that are significant, texturing on the seats, 3D modelling, liking the straps, the fact they're 3D, not just 2D over the top. Columns can be lowered. I don't know if this one can be, but certainly the one over here can. There it is. So surely that one must be. Yeah, they can both be removed for visibility. So yeah. Overall, I think the cockpit at the front is fine. I will mention compared to, say, the modern 737s, this thing is fairly Spartan on appearance upstairs. Obviously, because a lot of the stuff that's in a modern 737 used to be on a first officer's panel, and they've had to cram it in. But obviously, aesthetically, it will be familiar to all those who are Boeing fans. Really nicely done. There's not, with the fact of the first officer, etc., which we'll go into in a moment, there's not a massive lot that you need to get terrified about up there, which I think is good. Even better with this panel. This is the flight engineers panel. It was back in the day a 3-person aircraft, but yeah. So as I say, the FlyJ Sim version doesn't have the aids that this thing does. So this is all down to yourself. And in fairness, it's so long since I've flown that thing, I've pretty much forgotten how I would operate this in accordance with all the techniques that you need to know, or all of the information you need to know. But it's got things like generator drive, oil temperature, and I used to know a bit more about it from previous stuff, but it's all very nicely modelled. I think you'll agree. It's grubby, it's got wear, the texturing's lovely, the 3D modelling's great. These lights, the way they light up is fantastic. We'll see that in a bit. And then, as I say, down on the first officer's, the flight engineer's desk, you get a lot of information about the max go around, EPR, etc. So, as I say, lots of sections from the manual here. The calculator never runs out of battery, even at night, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But the hydraulics has got 2 systems, System A and System B. And this is where I'm sat there thinking, I don't think it's study level, because when I've gone through trying to muck around with well, actually it's got 3 systems, because it's got a standby system as well. But when I've gone through mucking around with it, I can still operate controls when maybe I shouldn't be able to, etc. So as I say, it's a long time since I've done too much delving into a 727 systems, but it's pretty good, to be fair. Again, duplicate for the various gauges that are needed up here. You've got your pressurization. Little gotcha is the first officer. We've got a handy first officer that helps you out here. They don't operate this switch, to the best of my knowledge. Well, they didn't in the last version that I flew, but this is the one that's been updated, and you have to set your altitude, which is a shame, because it could have read that just directly from what you put in here. But I suppose that's reliant on you putting the climb altitude as the maximum altitude straight away. As I mentioned in the documentation, you get a copy of the checklist to hand here, which is very nicely done. The only thing for me is this. I think in the real thing, yes, the flight engineer would read the checks out, but we're not going to use this in the sim land, or at least I'm certainly not. And then we get to things like the APU panel over here. So, as I say, interesting in the fact it's laid out. We would normally see this above our heads as those in the front seat. In terms of interior modelling, continues behind the doors. Very nicely done. Lovely sounds. That's lovely, isn't it? Absolutely lovely. We'll leave that open, get a bit of fresh air. And then if we go through here, as if by magic, we're in the cargo hold. And they've obviously paid attention to the timing of things like the doors, because this thing opens very slowly. I assume it does in real life. I've got no reason to doubt it. But here we are in the cargo hold. And yeah, really, really nicely done. So back into the cockpit. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the aids that are available to us. And there are 2 aids really that are significant. The first one is down here, which is our mobile phone, and the second one's down here, which is our clipboard. Now, actually, I'll just get rid of that. Clipboard is, for me, something that I find quite obtrusive with the position I sit in the aircraft. I think that for one of the things I would really have liked is the ability to have moved this around, and unless I've missed something big time, you can't. But it's such a huge obtrusive thing that it's just like it takes over everything. So that's one of the things I'm not keen on. I am keen, however, on this little bad boy. This is your mobile phone. Now, one of the things they've tried to do is they've tried to steer away from the EFB, the electronic flight bag, which I absolutely get, because with an aircraft of this vintage, it's nice to have a clipboard with some check sheets on or checklists on, and that's where your options are. As you can see, we've got plenty of options here to play with, and we'll have a look through a couple of these pages. But then this is really slick, this thing here, this crew manager. So this is basically where you set up how much help you get in the aircraft. So you've got automatic monitoring, which you can set up. And I've gone lazy, I'll be honest. I'm not interested in figuring out how to work out the fuel heaters or the EPR limits. I've got somebody who's set up this nice little program to do it for me, so I'm going to take advantage of it. At the end of the day, why not? It makes my job easier as the pilot. And then the crew manager flow procedure. When you click these, your corresponding crewmates will go through their checks. So the flight engineer will go through his checks on his panel, and your first officer will go through their checks on their panel. And it's really, really good. I do like this. The only thing I would like is something in terms of sound. You'll hear them clicking away as they're doing their switches, which is great. The only thing I would like is some sort of feedback in terms of sound to say pre-flight checks complete, before start checks complete. You don't. It just turns green and you've got no audio cue that it's finished doing what it's doing, which is a real shame. Right, back to this bad boy. It's big, it's imposing, but it's actually really well done. I do like how they've done it. It's just slick. It's not overcomplicated. There's not too much to it. Done very nicely. So ground, we can remove the chocks and the cones. Engine covers, you can set them if you wish. Ground power, you connect if you wish. I'm not going to put it on now because it's noisy. Then you can open your various doors, panel states, and then down here to your nav equipment. So you only get one nav panel down here, and it's going to be one of these. It has to be one of these. GNS 530, which we've got at the moment, but I can't deselect that. So it's either going to be that, the SIVA, which is the inertial navigation system, or I'm going to go for the GTNXi. Now I've had issues with this, as I say. It seems to block the vertical sections of the autopilot. So what will happen is you'll be climbing on indicated airspeed. It should start to level out for your pre-selected altitude, and it doesn't. It seems to just bust straight through it, and it also causes issues with the, or has caused me issues with the autopilot panel. But that's a GTNXi thing. I've flown the aircraft without the GTNXi, and it's been absolutely perfect. So I've just downloaded the Pro version of the GTNXi. I'm hoping it's rectified those issues. If it hasn't, then I just won't fly with the GTNXi. That'll force me to relearn the SIVA. Having said that, this sends cold-blooded shudders through me. I used to use a system called TANS in the Navy, which is the Tactical Air Navigation System. And it's disturbingly similar to this in operation. It's just that it used Doppler signals off the bottom of the aircraft with Doppler sensors to detect forward, backward, left, right, etc. So by no way was it as accurate as an inertial navigation system. It used to drift like heck. It was a horrible system, really. But when you're out in the middle of nowhere, in the days before GPS was everywhere, what did you use in an aircraft? But anyway, it gives me the shivers. I haven't got up the confidence to, the confidence or the courage, I should say, to get involved in playing with this. However, as I understand it, it's a pretty accurate representation of it. But yeah, it's if you really want to go into depths and enjoy what the aircraft would have been like to fly back in the day, this is a really good way to do it. So yeah, as I say, I'm just not brave enough today. So we'll go back to our GTNXi and see what happens with that. Okay, so this is where we can make use of this equipment here. So what we're going to do is we are going to connect the ground power. And we're going to ask our flight engineer and first officer to do the pre-flight checks, and you'll see they start doing stuff, and stuff starts clicking, and the GPU is now powering us up, and the flight engineer starts going through tests. I don't know if the cargo door will open, but we'll have a look and see if it does. That sounds promising though, doesn't it? Is that opening? That's the APU firing up. Yeah, see how slowly that thing's opening. Sounds are great. flickering lights. I assume that's intentional. APU's firing up. Fantastic. Looks really, really nice. Sounds amazing. The sounds in this thing are really good. And now we've got all the stuff powered up. Just brilliant. Just brilliant. Love the sounds. So evocative of what it'd be like to be in one of these things. The only aircraft of this era that I've flown in that I can remember, so you know, when I was a child I can't really remember it, but the only things from this era that I've flown in are the Sea Kings that I flew in the Navy, which is surreal. Still going through its pre-flight checks. I'll leave them to it. In the meantime, what I'll do is I'll program my my Garmin and I'll be back with you. Okay, so I've stuck the navigation into the aircraft, so we'll just go through the rest of it. They've finished doing their stuff, so what I need to do is go over here. I'm going to download my stuff from SimBrief EDDF, and then what we can do is we can start loading. Did we give them any air stairs? Boarding stairs? No, we didn't. Would be very nice. They don't have to climb up with their crampons. So that will set it off, loading the SimBrief setup. This is such a good thing these days for the simmers. We don't want to spend hours mucking around. And as you can see, it's loading the aircraft up accordingly. We then get to the takeoff page. We are going from 07 centre, but it doesn't have centre on here. So I'm going to go 07 left. The reason being, if I bring this over. This is Navigraph, and if I look at our airfield, where have we gone? Down here. You'll see on here, let's put ourselves on it as well while we're here. So we're down here in one of the remote parking spaces. I don't know what this would be used for in real life, but today it's used for a 727 flown by an idiot. So anyway, you can see we've got 3 parallel runways. Now I'm not sure which one 07 centre is on this setup here. With in fact, what we can do is, has it got the distance available? Yeah, runway takeoff available. If I do 7 right, 7 left. Yeah, it's got the same distance. So I'm going to go for 7 left because that's what we're supposed to be taking off on. If I get this back up, you'll see that it's now considering that it's got these two are the same length, so I assume it's left and right in the eyes of the sim, although here it's the centre one. So we're using the centre here, but it's left on the sim. So that's, I don't know what's going on in terms of a discrepancy between Navigraph and the aircraft. Nothing to do with the scenery, I would have thought, but there we go. So we're EDF off, that's the current weather. You can refresh it by clicking the arrow. It's got QNH 2992. For some reason, when you set everything to metric, you still don't get a metric QNH, which bugs me because as someone who flies in Europe predominantly, used to metric QNH. So, but 2992 is equivalent to 1013. I think the standard flaps for takeoff is 25. I think it's 30 for landing. And then we've got the data here in terms of flap limit. Speeds for flaps and weights, etc. And then down here you can automatically set EPA and trim, which is really good. And then flight, we'll come back to this when we're in flight, but it's a bit of a weird one. Not sure if I like it or not. What we can do is we can come back here, we can just click here, fast forward, instantly loads whatever you've got. This page, really slick, really well done, really like it. So yeah, so that's that. What we've done now, we've loaded, we can then click that button, make sure we've got the latest weather, and then come down here to set EPR and trim. So you see the trim set up here with these white bugs. Set speeds, sorry, that's the speeds being set, 134, 134, 135, and then we've got the takeoff EPR N1. So the takeoff EPR, the bugs are normally going to be visible here. They're down here at the minute. You can probably just see them. That's it there. And that's what we're doing for our power settings. To set EPR and trim, you can hear the trim wheel go, and then obviously our bugs will be set accordingly. So we've got an EPR of 2.0. And there we go. So next thing, we'll just click before start because we're just finishing off what we're doing here. Various doors are going to close. We're on APU. So let's just go over to the flight engineer's panel. We'll just have a quick look. He's clicking away merrily. Still got the AC power connected, but the external power is currently off. And if I look at the GPU power, we're getting GPU power. Standby GPU Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, external power. So I'm just going to disconnect the external power because we're on APU, we can hear it anyway. So boarding stairs remove, close the various doors and remove ground power. There we go. Got rid of that noisy truck outside. So there we go. That's pretty much it. The only thing I need to do is let me just get my documentation up. What altitude are we going to? We're going up to... Oh, we're only going up to 220 apparently. Oh well, we'll take it at that. 220. Obviously that's what it's planned for. EDDF to EBBR. Oh yeah, it has. But it's only doing flight level 220. Very weird that. But there we go. Never mind, eh? So we're going to put our altitude pre-selector. When I've had a look at the route, we're not flying online, so we're just going to climb all the way out. We're going to 22,000 feet then. If you want to do hundreds, just flick the switch and it'll do hundreds for you. $22,000 seems quite low for the distance we're covering, but we'll take it. That's what SimBrief's given us. Clear the warning. But we've done our before start check, so we're going to do the start now. So let's get rid of this. Boom, got rid of that. And the start from our point of view is pretty easy. So let's have a look at what lights we've got on at the moment. Beacons on, navigation lights on. Everything else is looking hunky-dory. And this is one of the things with the support from the other crew. Things like anti-skid tests don't need to be done as of yet. They will sort them out in their own accord, which makes it quite user-friendly. So if you're not skilled at switch flicking, you've got some support here, which is really, really nice. But from our point of view, what we're going to do is we're going to use these switches up here. Starter for engine 1. And what we should see to start with is N2 rising, so we've gone past 10%. N1 will start to rise because you've got air going through the engine. And then once we set fire to everything, that's when we should see the exhaust gas and the fuel flow come alive. But we should be able to set fire to things now. So let's have a go. And then what we've got to do is monitor it. EGT is rising. It rises quite quickly. Normally it settles out about 440, 420, 440. There we go. Goes back down. The little click you heard was the switch up here going off. Do the same for 2. And just wait for its N2 to rise. Now I haven't tested, I don't know if you can burn your engines out. But at the end of the day, you don't really want to mess around doing that because you just have to reload everything. As I say, unlike a lot of modern aircraft now, it doesn't have failure modelling. But having said that, it's a fairly complex model, so it's going to take a lot of time and effort to model. And the reality is, for most of us who fly the aircraft that have failure modelling, we generally don't do it. The only kind of circumstance you'd want to do it really is if you are actually playing around with practicing emergencies, for which a study level aircraft is quite useful. You can do your some of the switchology at home really, which is where I start to consider something as study level, is once you can use it as a training tool, albeit maybe limited in terms of its functionality. That's where you might want to consider it to be a study sim, but this is certainly not study sim. I hate the phrase, people use it, it's bandied around a lot. I think for me this is a medium complexity add-on, probably the better way to describe it for me. You're certainly going to need to do a little bit of reading to work with it, EGT's coming up. You see now all our oil lights are out. The next time they'll come on is either when we shut the engines down or if we have a filter blockage. But as I say, I don't believe that failure modelling is currently included in this. So anyway, that's us with our engines started. We'll do the after start checks there. We'll just go to our overhead and close that. I'm going to set, although we're not online, I'm going to set 230. This is one of those weird things, is the weird things like the old locations for things like transponders. Whereas now we have it obviously as part of the radio panel or part of the GTN-XI. But we'll stick that on just for the sake of having it on. TARA. Still got some clicking going on the after starts. Now one of the things we're going to do with this, it's one of the beauties of an aircraft like this, is we can do our own pushback. So although I have GSX, and I've been playing around with GSX, I'm not getting with it. It's a great app, and I'm sure lots of people use it, but for me I just seem to muck everything up, which is a shame. Right, after starts are all done. See, the anti-skid is still to be tested. I don't quite yeah, sometimes what it will do is sometimes you'll do something and then all of a sudden it will set it back to its default or whatever. It's just a case of knowing where things are in the checklist. So what we'll do now is we'll get ourselves powered back and take it from there. Now I haven't got my throttle set up with reverse thrust, so I just use F2. The number of aircraft I'm going to need to throttle back with is pretty limited. Beautiful sounds. Beautiful. Actually, we will just zoom in a little bit for these bad boys. We'll give ourselves a bit of room. Oh, I do like the animation of the wheels, look. Look at these. You see what I mean in terms of the fact there's no air going out the back of that thing. Beautiful. And backwards we go. All three engines as well, look. Nice heat haze. Love the rotating lamp as well. Yeah. Lovely. Very atmospheric. Really cool trip. Really cool thing to do on the aircraft. Really like it. Okay, so let's just get ourselves taxiing. I'm trying to get my feet on my pedals because I've got a new little hidey hole in the house for my stuff, my flight sim, and unfortunately the desk interrupts my pedals, but that's a me problem. I'm sure something I'll eventually get sorted. Pop the taxi light on. I'm just going to stick these on in case we get to oh, that's cool. Flight only. Normal. How cool is that? I'm just going to crack these. This is just a personal preference. But for me, with the exception of that switch, it's all looking pretty cool. Now the switch that I've always found that never gets done is this one up here. Actually, whilst we're at it, we do need to set this to flight level 220. Again, I think that's a bit low, but there we go. Not going to bother about landing altitude. That needs to go to flight, otherwise you have the aircraft fails to pressurise and we'll get warning lights and klaxons and all sorts of noise, which I don't really want. Anyway, there we go. So let's get going with the taxi. We'll have a look at its taxi characteristics, see what it's like. Now, there's an interesting element to the taxi characteristics. We'll just get some of it going. You'll notice that's full left rudder. Now, you could argue that I could set up the controls individually for each aircraft, but I find that weird that in every other aircraft with that setting I get full rudder. Now this probably is full rudder, but the turn rate is really low. And then the other thing that's noticeable, the turn radius seems okay, but the turn seems to be that when you then stop to start going the other way, full rudder. So let's just keep on the tarmac, will we? We'll try not to take off while we're here, but I'll show you what I mean. We'll take a left turn here. Engine instruments all looking good. So we're feeding the left pedal, and the turn is pretty decent once you're at speed. I think it's when you're slow, it's just not keen on it, but what we'll do is I'll deliberately bring it over this way, and then I put full left rudder in. That's full left rudder. And now I'm going to go full right rudder. And that is just really slow. Now, one of the advantages is it's really accurate, but let's have it with a bit of power on. No, it doesn't make any difference whether you've got power on or not. It's just really sluggish and slow. But as I say, the advantage is it means you can be very accurate. It doesn't spring all over the place, and during takeoff and landing it's quite beneficial if you've got a bit of a crosswind. But in terms of handling, although says he's wriggling all over the yellow line now, in terms of the ground handling, it makes it difficult if you're in a tight spot. Now, as I say, that might just be the way I've got my pedals set up, but they seem fine with every other add-on aircraft, so I'm not quite sure why this one would be different. I'm just going to get my Navigraph up, and I will see you at the hold. So I'm just going to mention as I'm taxiing, just very quickly, I've got a little bit of speed on here, and the taxiing seems to be a little bit more tolerable with a bit of speed on. It says here as he just starts to get to a point where it's no longer responding how he wants, which is most frustrating. Yeah, we lost a little bit of speed there as I was trying to turn. We'll put a little bit of speed on, not too much. It seems to handle better when it's got a bit of speed on. You see what I mean? It's nice and easy to follow the yellow line. But when it's slower, it's an absolute nightmare with... so it's much easier if you've got a bit of speed on. But having said that, whilst I remember, instead of playing around, let's put the taxi checks in place. It's probably beneficial, I would have thought. But yeah, so the ground handling seems better at a slightly higher speed, which is interesting. But yeah, see you at the hold. Okay, so we're at the hold. What we're going to do is, before we go any further, we're just going to click that, and we're going to have a look at Frankfurt, which I said we'd have a look at. But as you can see, it's quite a large expanse. You've got the third runway over on the far side there. I believe this is the main sort of terminal side. And it looks like it's been very nicely modelled, all told. Radar spinning around there. I must admit, I don't know what runways are used for what, but obviously you've got all three modelled. Some nice texturing. I've got FSTL, I think it is, traffic injector, so this is not necessarily static traffic that comes with the add-on itself. But yeah, it looks very nice. Scoot down here, in amongst the trees, down by the trucks. So I assume this is going to be the cargo centre over here. Yeah, very nicely done. Very nicely done. Yeah, so at least now I've found the cargo centre. That's all good. FedEx, DHL, They're all down here. Phone's just gone bring. Nice. And then I guess this is over to the passenger section. No, we're still cargo here, aren't we? Lufthansa cargo. Yeah. Fuel farm there. Really nicely set out as well. As I say, my only experience of Frankfurt was flying in and then the following day flying out, courtesy of a bed and breakfast / hotel, crew hotel, which was very nice. Got no complaints, but I have to say it wasn't the greatest. I didn't get the greatest look around. I literally saw the getting off the aircraft, onto the crew bus, through passport control, slept over, back on passport control, back on crew bus, back on the plane. That was years ago though, so you can't do that these days. But we're obviously into passenger land here, and you can see there's a lot of passengers. We were parked on one of the remote stands over here. So yeah, I can't tell you anything about the inside of this this airport at all. It was nice, don't get me wrong, it was nice. But yeah, really well modelled. Can we go into the buildings? I don't know. Doesn't look very see-through, does it? Oh, yeah, we can. Oh, hello. Well, we can't go into the building, but we can see the inside of the building. So, really nicely done. A lot of work and effort's gone into this, hasn't it? When you see this down here. Really nicely done. Ignore the static traffic. I think that's FSTL injected traffic, but yeah, really nice. So from the handful of occasions where I've flown this in the sim, it's been very, very nice. Textures are lovely. I've not fallen through any gaping holes, but lovely. So back into the cockpit then. Here we are. So, our friends have done the taxi checks. We're just going to do the before takeoff checks, get those going, make sure. Are they going to do this one? Surely they are. In the meantime, we'll just go down here, we'll select our rejected takeoff. Actually, that's up on the overhead, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much, guys. And you've selected rejected takeoff. Very nice indeed. Check flaps. Flaps 15, which is the takeoff setting. We'll talk about nav equipment at the moment. So, as I say, the autopilot and the flight director are completely separate systems. Now, in terms of the flight, what we're going to do, or what I'm going to try and do, it's not been the most successful thing for me because it's I'm still a bit rusty. But what we're going to do is, when we get to rotate, we're obviously going to rotate, and we're going to look to achieve V2 plus 10. And V2, if I remember rightly, was 135. Where's me? 130. So we're going to be looking to rotate at 128 and climb out at minimum 140. So that's 130 plus 10. And then looking at my chart, we should be doing that until we're 1,000 feet above the airfield elevation with a maximum 17 degrees nose up. And then we're going to, at 1,000 feet, we're going to drop the nose 8 to 10 degrees, 500 feet a minute or so. And then retract the flaps as per what we need. 3,000 feet, we're going to then go into our climb from there. So in effect, the acceleration point is at 1,000 feet. To 3,000 feet. So yeah, there we go. So I'll just mention this as well. This is an interesting instrument. If you've ever flown your Cessna or something like that, you'll be familiar with the VSI. This is what's called an instantaneous VSI. So vertical speed indicator is a pressure instrument, and there's a certain amount of lag always in a pressure instrument. So the instantaneous VSI has a little bob weight in it that, as you then go up and down, it starts to move the needle. So if you like, the aim is to get rid of that lag, or to minimise the lag. But just in case you see the eye in front of a VSI, that's why it's there. What I will do is, we're going out on 07. So I'm just going to bring my heading round 207. So if we have any issues, what we can do is we can just plug in heading hold and we'll control it that way. Obviously this is all set up automatically by the nav equipment, and what we're going to do now is just going to put, we said 17 degrees, so let's turn the nav on, so it'll come on for heading. Obviously it's going to be it's going to be out to the right. Now I've noticed a discrepancy quite a lot of the time when I've flown it on the VOR localizer. In theory that should also pick up the needle for our GTN Xi 750, but we'll see, because that's have we got another nav? No, so we've only got back bearing, off heading, VOR localizer and approach, but there we go. Oh yes, whilst we mention it, there's a couple of things. Altitude hold switch I generally don't use, but that's altitude hold, and then you also have, in fact we didn't really go through this, that's one of the things on the front page. Oh, where's it gone? Auto throttle switch. Now they do warn in the manual, in the instructions, that really it's just for the cruise. So in theory you'd get yourself all set up, do your climb, get to your cruise, and then just click on to engage it, and it should maintain that airspeed with the auto throttle. I tend not to use it, just a personal preference, but it is there should you wish to. So where's it gone? Auto throttle switch, hide. So yeah, that's an option should you wish to choose it, but I tend to have it off. There's my takeoff page again. As I say, a little bit intrusive, so actually I'll get rid of it. So I use my little moniker from when I was doing my commercials, which I apply to virtually any aircraft. So it's frozen A2PL, so flaps have got set 15, altimeters are set, transponders set, pitot heats are on, and lastly landing lights, because we're going onto the runway. So before takeoff, see if we've got our landing lights on. We've got everything on. We're lit up like a Christmas tree. Let's have a look outside actually what we look like with our lights. Let's just put it into darkness. Yeah, they look kind of good, didn't they? Nice. Let's go back to our preset time. It's probably about there-ish. So yeah. Leading edge devices. If you'll notice, these are the slats that you most commonly see on an aircraft, a modern aircraft. Moves down and forwards to increase the lift at low speeds. These are your Kruger flaps, which if we, let me just do this. Which if we have a look at, are subtly different. So these have moved down and forwards in order to create the airflow needed for greater lift at slow speeds. The Kruger flaps are a very different beast. Nice actually to see the underside of these things. They're nicely modelled. Very basic, but yeah, I would say that there's aircraft where we've seen better modelling of this sort of thing. But it's functional, that's what it says on the tin. Textures are okay. Jump back in. Right, let's get this thing going then and see how we get on. Brakes off. And this is where I can embarrass myself by not managing to do what I should be doing. Now in terms of the departure, it's technically an RNAV departure that we're doing, but we're using our GPS, so we can fly it. Whether or not it would be certified to use a GTN Xi 750 in real life, I strongly suspect it wouldn't be, but who knows? Who knows? Nice noises as we're bumping over lights. We're in Simland, but we'll give a cursory look for where we're going. We'll try not to leave unused runway behind us. Come on, turn. Got a little bit of right braking just to try and get this thing round. Yeah. For me, it's a bugbear with this aircraft. You can see we're now starting to pick up quite a bit of speed from doing that. So I'll have to recenter on the centre line. You can get rid of the crew manager, don't need that at the moment. So we'll see if I can keep up with the aircraft. I've not been that great with this one, to be fair. It's taken a bit of practice for me, so make sure the engines are responding, which they are, and let's get ourselves up to an EPA of 2. Try and keep some semblance of being on the centre line. Power set. Nice sounds, love the sounds. It's a bit of a ground gripper. Trying not to get a tail strike. Gear up. We've gone quite high then, we've gone to... oh no we haven't. There we go. That's 15 degrees. We're actually flying at 160, so a little bit fast if anything. But we can drop our nose down at this point, start to accelerate. 7 to 8 degrees nose up. Oh, didn't need to trim too much there. Now you can't use the autopilot below 1100 feet, but we will plug it in. Put it indicated airspeed. And put it on nav localizer, and let's see what we get. Ah, that looks pretty good. Seems to be taking it. Now, what we will do is see if we can swap it to... Make sure we've got all the flaps up that we need. She's going up quite quickly. Look at that, 4,000 feet already. Ooh. Right, let's bring the power back a little. And let's come down here. Let's set them off for the after takeoffs. They'll start doing their clicky clickies. And I'll just have a double check. Yeah, the Navigraph plan says it looks like we are following the essential flight plan. So, let's have a little talk whilst it's doing that about the autopilot. And the basics of it. Now it's a Sperry type, which has been represented here. What I need to do here is select altitude select, if it will let me do so. This is where it's doing its silly thing. Let's change it to vertical speed. Altitude select armed. You need to arm the altitude select, otherwise what will happen is you'll bust straight through your altitude. Now this is where I'm hoping the GTN-XI is not going to play silly games with me now, but you can see altitude selects there. We're on VOR localizer, GPS, and then on the right hand side we haven't reached our altitude. When we reach our altitude that we've desired, it will turn green here with altitude, but you can see the modes down here now, and we've got altitude select armed. Now the issue I've had previously is that when I've had altitude select armed, it's not armed it. It's not responded to it. It's not leveled out. So we'll keep it on, see if the GTN XI is going to be nice to us now or not. But if I choose indicated airspeed, do you see what I mean? It seems to drop out the altitude hold. So that's the GTN XI. That's nothing to do with the aircraft. What I will try and do is see if I can... Yeah, if I want to change the rate of climb, I've got to put it back into vertical speed. Or the speed, I should say. But got a slight descent going on, but what I want is 250 knots to climb away. In fact, we need 270, 280, really. What we'll do is we'll let it accelerate. Give ourselves a couple of turns of vertical speed. Vertical speed again. Just pop some power in. And what we'll do now is we'll do it on vertical speed again. And it should control our speed at 300 knots. And it will do that by pitching forwards and aft. Past 10,000. Has it done our light simulator? Yes, it has. Except it doesn't do the taxi light for whatever reason. But yeah. So while we're climbing, before we see what carnage arrives at the top, we'll just have a quick think about what the aircraft's like. It's an absolute joy to hand fly. I'll be honest, it's really, really nice. I just find it great to fly things where it's a bit more hands-on. Quite often, though, I'll find myself behind the aircraft. And by that, what I mean is anyone who's flown in real life, and a lot of sim pilots will realise this, when you're behind the aircraft, you're always trying to catch up. Whereas what you want to be is ahead of the aircraft. And I haven't been doing that much flying recently. Just for whatever reasons, I'm not going to go into that. But what it's meant is that I permanently, in a lot of aircraft that are older, so you don't get the aids, aircraft like this, they're older, I find that I'm quite often behind the aircraft. And for me, that's just something that I need to work at and get better at. So for this aircraft, I quite often find I am behind the aircraft. And that's just one of those things, it's just practice. When you're out of practice, it's easily done. It's easy to just go hell for leather and think, yeah, this is going to be great, I've done this before. And if you're out of practice, it doesn't work like that. So this aircraft for me is one where it's a great aircraft for training, because you need to be aware of the aircraft, you need to get to grips with the aircraft, what it can do and what you should be doing with it. We're now rolling nice and level. It is maintaining the speed. You can see the speed bug now is 300, well 290, but we're just below it at the moment. But I'm happy with that. I would say close enough for government work. Well, it's probably not, but it's close enough for my work today. So what we're doing now is just having a wander up to flight level 220, which seems inordinately low. Don't know why. I don't know why SimBrief's given me that, but obviously the fuel planning hopefully will have been worked out on that. So yeah, we'll see. So I'll see you towards the top of climb, and we'll see if it behaves.
Crossing 17,500.
Okay, so here we get the fun and games. Let's see if this thing's going to level out. So as I say, we're on indicated airspeed. It should, in theory, get to the point where just below flight level 220, it drops the nose and it levels out. And nope, not a Scooby. It's not interested at all. So let's go into vertical speed, chunter it down a bit, and let's see if we can re-intercept from beneath. Still got the altitude select. Let's see if it levels out coming this way. Yes. So now I don't know if this is a sim thing or a GTN-XI thing, possibly GTN-XI, because I had issues. I didn't have issues with it when I was when I didn't have the GTN-XI. So it struggled with the indicated airspeed hold in the climb and descent, but obviously vertical speed it hasn't got an issue. So now I haven't got the autopilot set in, so in terms of speed control it's down to my my throttle control. That's good enough for government work. I'll accept that. It's probably better than I can do, but we'll just keep an eye on this as we go. So yeah, it's the integration with the GTN-XI doesn't seem to be great. Having said that, what I would say is that as a whole the aircraft does exactly what it says on the tin. The Sperry takes a little bit of learning, I'll be honest. It takes a bit of practice. It does help if it does what it's supposed to do. Let's just take a bit of power off. We'll go to about... But yeah, so the thing it wasn't entirely clear initially for me, whether I missed it in the manuals or whatever, I don't know. If you manage descent, if you click start now, it starts your autopilot. So it will start the autopilot doing the descent. It doesn't actually have the reference point for the end point. So unlike a VNAV, where you'd have the target as a position and an altitude, in this case it's just the altitude. So at the point you click that, it will start its descent to 7,000 feet, and it will take it that distance to do it, there or thereabouts. It depends what airspeed you're doing, but fundamentally that's how that thing works. So it confused me to start with, because I was going, oh, I'll start now, oh no, what have I done? So basically it's a bit of a helper, but I've found occasionally it causes me issues, but that's me, dare I say it, that's me, not the sim. But yeah, it's another one of the little tools. So I'm not sure if I'll try it this time, but I need to be 7,000 or above at Flora. So the thing with this now is that when I look at this, unlike a more modern aircraft, so this is Flora, this is where we need to be at or above 7,000. Now the safe altitude down here, we've got 3,500 here as the safe altitude for this area, so 7,000 is well above it, but what I want to do is I want to be down at 7,000, just because otherwise if I stay hot and high I'm going to be causing myself no end of pain. So I need to figure out how to measure my way to Flora. So let's just get rid of that for the minute, and Flora is here. So I need to figure out a way to calculate my descent point that I need for that. You can see we're down here, so it's not very far to go at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, and I need 47 nautical miles from flow. And I'm going to go back nearest. No, that's not what I want. I want waypoint BOR, and we want FLO. Find it, and then it should give me my distance, which is only 57 miles. So we need to start thinking about a descent. We've only got 7 or 8 miles to go, but that's what I can do there to help me out. So yeah, 47 miles. What I might do is I might start it a little early, and we'll see how we get on. The other thing I've got an option to do is if I go to flow, it's a VOR DME. Its bearing is 11205. So I can come down here, and I'm going to put it on this side. 11205. And hopefully, if I put the figures in. Right, so we're not getting a VOR DME readout yet. Maybe we're just a little bit too far from that particular one. Ah, here we go. 49 miles. So, let's click start now. And you'll see all of a sudden it takes over the autopilot. It takes over the autopilot. There we go, we've started going down. Now I'm going to manually have to bring the throttle back, otherwise we'll overspeed. Because we're on manual throttle, we haven't got any auto throttles. And it should take us down. It's expecting us to go down at 1900 feet a minute. And we'll see how it gets on. Okay, so the descent isn't looking too bad. It's looking, we've got 20 miles left to go and we've got 6,500 feet to descend, so it's not looking too bad at all, to be honest. Better than I thought it would be, but what we'll do is we'll just go down here and set up our ILS stuff. So the ILS is on 11035, 11035. I'm going to leave this one because it's measuring our distance, but I can also set it up on the right hand side as 11035, ready to go. And then make sure the 110.35 is on the left hand box and selected to go. So we should at some point begin the ILS. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of heading mode here. So what I need to do is get my heading bug to where we're at. Just gone over a beacon there. And I'm going to do this pretty quickly. Right, what's the inbound course for my 249? So what I'm going to quickly do is come down here. I'm going to do heading select. Is it going to let me do heading? Oh, really? Heading select. Then we're going to come over here. I'm going to just flick this switch here. And then we want this to go to 249. For the ILS. This is about there. Then we're going to go back to GPS. So 249 is there, all good, and then we're going to put this back to VOR nav localizer. So there we go, we've set up our ILS. We can do that possibly over here, or no, it's ganged together, so we can't do that there. But we set it up on box 1, so we're quite happy with that. So there we go, continuing the descent, see how we're doing. 1,000 to go. And we pretty much judged that okay, didn't we? Right, let's come down here. That's what we want. So what we're going to do now is we're going to keep going down because we need to get down to our altitude of where are we at? 3,000 feet. So let's set this to 3,000 feet. Where's it gone? I'm going mad here. Here we go. 3,000 feet. Doesn't like that, does it? Oh well. Is it going? Yeah. Okay. So let's see what happens here. Let's bring ourselves round to the right. Let's do heading hold. So we need to pop that one there. Let's take our heading ourselves. I'm going to go out here, and then this we're going to swap on to Oh, we're on nav already. How fascinating. So we've got our course in. I'm going to bring up my chart on the other page. And we shouldn't be on heading, so let's just steer ourselves round. We've bust through the centre line. So, if all else fails, let's get back to flying it manually. Anyone seen an airfield round here? We'll take these early. Oh, this is awful. This is truly horrible. That looks like an airfield to me. That looks like the sky to me. Oh no, airfield's over here according to the instrumentation. Be all the way over there then. We do not want to be going down. Right, I am so far behind the aircraft, it's not funny now. And we're high on glide slope and we're off centre line. This is all going horribly wrong. This is a perfect example of how not to do it and why you need to try and keep ahead of the aircraft. Oh, there's our airfield. Anyone seen an airfield around here? Let's get some flaps out and try and recover some semblance of a landing. Are you doing the landing checks? Trim, trim, trim. Going a bit too slow. Still too high. Off centre line, correcting. Correcting badly. We're far, far, far too high. God, this is an awful approach. This is embarrassing. I'm a sim stuttering. Oh, horrible stutters. God, I'm down to 12 frames a second, 14 frames a second. Now, if anybody has any good YouTube videos to go to for how to set up or to optimize Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 with an RTX 4080. How on earth am I getting this with a 4080? I don't want to slam it into the ground. We might actually get away with something that resembles a landing. Although a centre line would be nice. If anyone's seen one, can you just send me the postcode? God, that was shocking. Oh, that was horrendous. That was horrendous. Okay. let's ignore that last section. Does anybody remember the bit where I said if you get behind the aircraft, you're in a world of pain? Doing that as you're setting up for your approach is not great. So yeah, okay. Let's ignore the numpty landing at the end there. In all honesty, this is a really good aircraft. Within what I'm expecting of it. I'm not expecting it to be absolutely 100% accurate fidelity to the real thing. And the reality is I'm not going to fly a 747, a 727. I don't know many people who are. So it's not going to be necessarily a training tool. It's not going to be something where you're going to sit there and click loads of switches for a half an hour just to get the thing started. So I think within the framework of what's expected of it, really, really nice. Few little grumbles, if I'm honest. I find the steering, the ground, full left pedal, I've got no idea where we're going, but that's full left pedal. I'll have to put some brake in, otherwise we're going to ram into everything. But that's a bugbear for me. The ground handling is just, what the hell is going on? So that's a bugbear. Let's just bring it to a halt. And then some of the other bugbears are just small. It does work. It's just that I wasn't completely aware as to how much it interfered with this down here. So I don't need altitude select now, do I? Stupid thing. But yeah, so it's just a case of learning. It did a lovely descent. I seem to manage to bugger up getting it onto an approach. We went bombing through the centre line and then somehow managed to recover a semi-decent landing. Although it does give the cardinal rule of fly the aircraft, which is what we did. We turned everything off, we took control, and we managed to get something of a landing. But it was, I'll be honest, it was awful. This setup, really, really nice. Love the way that this is set up. And again, if you want to, you can put your Navigraph charts in the folder as well. This setup, really, really nice. Really like this, the way it helps you out. Makes a 3-crew aircraft much easier. So you're just interested in the sticky bits. This does open. We'll just shut it up for now, will we? Oh, there we go. Nicely done. So realistically, there's not much to grumble about. It's just a few bits and bobs. I think it's a lovely thing. But as I say, what it takes is a little bit of work, a little bit of bookwork. I'm my own worst enemy. I'm still getting to grips with this thing. And as you can see, on occasions I'm tending to get behind the aircraft, and then it's very difficult to catch up. This GTN XI, it's good and it's bad. It's good for the LNAV, the lateral navigation. It's very good for that. But it seems to have a little bit of a fight every now and again with the autopilot. So I'd say is if you're having trouble with this and the autopilot, get rid of this and then just fly on the VORs. And this thing works really well just flying on VORs. It's very, very nice. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, don't forget to tick like, share and subscribe. Likewise, thanks to Aerosoft for the scenery that they've supplied. Absolutely brilliant, Frankfurt. The only thing I'm having issues with is my sim seems to be running everything at between 20 and 30 frames per second, which, given the machine I've got, the details are in the description, seems to be a tad off. So apologies for any stuttering and any issues with that. But as I say, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to tick like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, where hopefully I'll manage to do a decent landing.